Welcome. In this video, we're going to go over the best gaming monitors of 2021. This is a summary of monitors I'm recommending of which I reviewed, and because this is a summary, that means that there might be some details that you might be looking for that I might not cover in this video. So if you want to see detailed reviews on the monitors that I'm talking about, check the links in the description. Also linked in the description will be links to buy these monitors if you planned on buying one. And if you did, please use those links in the description. It helps me financially at no extra cost to you. Also, when I'm talking about these monitors, I'm ignoring price for the most part. I'll be mentioning it here and there, but the price of these monitors won't generally affect how high or low they're going to be placed. I'm just telling you what's best, and depending on how much something costs in your area and depending on how much you can afford, you should basically make that decision for yourself. The segment that we'll be going over today are the 1080p 240Hz to 360Hz, 1440p 240Hz, 1440p 144Hz 16:9 and ultrawides, and 38-inch 1600p 144Hz ultrawides. I won't be going over any 1080p 144Hz monitors because they just don't interest me anymore. However, if you do want to know what the best 1080p 144Hz monitor is, I'm giving that to the BenQ Mobius EX2510. I have a review on that, link in the description, but there is also an EX2510S model, which seems to be just the same monitor, but this year's model with an extra 21 frames per second, but I haven't tested it out, so I don't really know for sure. If you want to take a look at that monitor as well, you could take a look. Now, before we get started, I'm going to break down some features that gaming monitors typically have. Usually these types of videos do the best on my channel, and because it's pulling in a new audience, I want to make sure that everybody knows what I'm talking about when I talk about a certain feature, but if you don't care about this part, just skip ahead. So, feature number one, we have input lag and response times. It's technically two, but I'm clamping them in one. There are two things that really determine how high a monitor is placed on my list, and input lag and response times are the biggest determining factor. Because this is a gaming monitor comparison, it would make no sense to recommend monitors that feel like they give some kind of mouth smoothing because of poor input lag or are extremely blurry. It's not a good gaming monitor, it just sucks. But I don't want you to get those two things confused, because when I was a noob at buying monitors, I thought response times and input lags were the same thing, just used interchangeably. Spoiler alert, they're not. Response times are how quick a pixel can transition from one color to the next. So basically, the lower that number is, the better and the less blurry a moving image is, which is good. Just keep in mind that when monitor manufacturers advertise 1 millisecond or 0.5 milliseconds response times on the box, it's usually a lie. There are overdrive settings that let you add more voltage to the pixels, which help reduce motion blur, but that can only go so far, and if you use a setting that's too high, you get this blue chromatic looking ghost trail, which is called overshoots, corona artifacts, inverse ghosting, whatever you want to call it, those names all work. Another response time feature that helps reduce response times is called black frame insertion, aka BFI, or backlight strobing. To keep this short, this is the best way to get response times to as low as they can get on LCD displays. The issue is that not all black frame insertion technologies work the same, and there are other issues as well. For example, because the backlight literally strobes, this can cause some users to get headaches or eye strain, and if you know you're one of those people, you probably won't use this feature at all. The other issue is that most monitor manufacturers have a poor implementation of black frame insertion. While motion clarity is usually great between all monitors that include this technology, the issue is that most monitors suffer a 25 to 60% lower peak brightness, which means, you guessed it, a darker monitor. Next is input lag. Again, this is not response times. This is how quick the monitor displays your action from when you did your action. So like, if I move my mouse around, how quick does it show on the monitor? That's what input lag is. Obviously, the lower this is, the better, but keep in mind that I won't focus too much on this when going through my list because they all have some of the lowest input lag figures in the class they're competing in, otherwise they wouldn't be on this list at all. Other things I'll be mentioning is the black equalizer, which increases the brightness of shadows and dark areas, which is especially useful in competitive shooters where enemies like to hide in those dark areas, so you're less likely to see them. We also have color vibrance, which increases the saturation of colors, so if you're playing a game like Tarkov, Siege, and so on, you can increase the color saturation so enemies don't blend in with their background as easy if they were wearing some piece of armor that was similar to their background. Now, I think that's about it in terms of features, but we'll figure that out as I go on. But let's begin, starting with the 1080p 240Hz to 360Hz segment. This is for the ultra competitive types, those whose main games are CSGO, Valorant, Rainbow Six Siege, etc., and are pros or aspiring pros. These monitors are not for people that mainly play casual games or want to do any kind of professional color work, since pretty much none of them have wide gamut support, and then they're not even a good fit for editing anyways. Now, while there are a lot of different options for this segment, probably the most competition there is in any segment of monitors since it's so saturated, there are only a few monitors that stand out. First, we have the Acer Nitro XV252Q, otherwise known as the Acer AOpen 25XV2Q, which is 390Hz and has an IPS panel. Then we have the BenQ Zowie XL2546K at 240Hz with a TN panel. And then the MSI MAG251RX, which is also 240Hz with an IPS panel. Like I said already, they all have the lowest input lag you can get when it comes to gaming monitors, otherwise they wouldn't even be on this list. They all have great black equalizers and color vibrance functions as well, although the Zowie has a noticeably better black equalizer than the others. The Zowie also has the best response times. It has the worst standard response times, which for my definition of standard response times means that black frame insertion is turned off. But when you enable black frame insertion, otherwise known as DIAC for Zowie monitors, it's obviously the best here. But take a look at the MSI and the Acer. They also have good black frame insertion, except they really don't. Sure, it looks good, but their problem lies with the screen brightness. While the Zowie maintains about 330 nits of brightness with or without DIAC, the Acer goes from 417 nits down to 224 nits, and the MSI goes from 430 nits down to 169 nits. That's a huge difference, and also not nice. So if you're looking for the best response times, that'd be the Zowie with its DIAC, and it'll always be the Zowie for the foreseeable future, because that hasn't changed in the past few years since I've been reviewing monitors. That doesn't mean that it's the best monitor here though, because clarity isn't always king, especially when you have something like the Acer with its extra 150 frames per second. And if you want to use black frame insertion, you don't have to lose your precious 417 nits, because there is a lesser black frame insertion option called normal, which doesn't do quite as well as extreme, but does good enough and doesn't affect brightness at all. Combine that with the extra 50% more frames per second than the Zowie, and you have a recipe for the best esports monitor ever. Until LG releases their 480Hz model. Then that may be the best, but we'll see when I get my hands on that, if they even contact me because of what happened earlier this year. Anyway, before we move on to the next segment, two things. One, what about all the other 360Hz monitors, you may be asking? Well, simply put, they suck when you have something like the Acer 390Hz out there. The issue is that they include NVIDIA's G-Sync scaler, which limits a monitor's ability to stand out, since NVIDIA's tech literally limits how much functionality a monitor can have. I've already made a video on the 4 available 360Hz flagship monitors, but the only thing that they have going for them is the refresh rate. Their black frame insertion has a buttload of overshoot, their black equalizers suck, and there's no reason to spend 50 to 100% more than the Acer when the Acer is better than all of them, which is sad, being that Nitro isn't Acer's top-of-the-top gaming brand, but the Predator is, and that 360Hz model is just as booty as all the other 360Hz models. Number 2, I purchased the ViewSonic XG2431 Blurbuster certified monitor, so if you're waiting to see that review to see how good that monitor is, you'll see it sometime in December. Next, we have the 1440p 240Hz monitors. This is for the highest level of competitive gamers as well, but with more pixels. The top contenders we have are the Asus ROG Strix XG278QM, the Dell AW2721D, and the Samsung Odyssey G7. To keep it simple, the best one here is the Asus XG27AQM because it's literally a jack of all trades and master of many. The Asus and the Samsung both have very similar response times without black frame insertion, and the Dell doesn't have black frame insertion at all, so the Dell is really at a disadvantage when it comes to motion clarity. Kind of. Both the Samsung and Asus get a max peak brightness of 160 nits with black frame insertion enabled, so you really have to play in a dark room to take advantage of these monitors' black frame insertion. If black frame insertion doesn't interest you, then they're really all pretty much the same in terms of response times. I doubt you'll notice a difference between these even if you compare them side by side, at least when you compare their standard response times. The black equalizer between all of them are pretty similar and perform about average, with the Asus being the only one including color vibrance, so if you care about this stuff, the Asus is the best for you. Then there's the color performance. Being that these monitors have a higher pixel density than 1080p monitors, and they also have wide gamut support, you can potentially do some professional color work on these monitors, as long as you realize that these are not mastering monitors, nor should you ever expect that to be, especially from a gaming monitor. So You can only get so far with these, and if you're a professional, like actually that's your job, you still want to use your work monitor or something like that. Anyway, the best one here is the Asus because it has the widest gamut with 100% sRGB and Adobe RGB coverage and 95% DCI-P3 coverage. This is much higher than the Dell's 84% Adobe RGB coverage and just 1% less in P3 coverage. Then we have the Samsung, which just doesn't even compete. Combine that with a curved VA panel, which mine had major backlight bleed issues, and you have a monitor which can be used for pro color work, but it's definitely not ideal. It's the worst one on this list. It's not all perfect for the Asus though, because out of the box, it had the worst color accuracy by a wide margin. 5.28 versus around a delta E of 2 for the Dell and the Samsung, which is pretty good default performance. But really, if you're doing pro color work, the Asus's poor performance won't matter because you likely have a tool to calibrate the display, which none of these displays have issues with calibrating. If you aren't able to tell by now, the Asus is the best here. But what about the amazing Acer Predator XB273U GX? Well, if you live next to a micro center, cool. Not everybody lives next to 3 micro centers like I do. Yes, that is a humble brag. But if you do live near one and there is one available, then go for it. It's basically the same as the Asus in terms of performance and has nearly the same features that perform just as great as well. It's a really good monitor. Just depends if it's going to be on sale this Black Friday and Cyber Monday and whatnot. Next, we have the 34-inch 1440p 144Hz ultrawides. The 3 contenders here are the BenQ Mobius EX3415R, the Gigabyte G34WQCA, and the LG 34GP83A-B or the LG 34GN850, which is the same as the 34GP83A-B but with better HDR, which doesn't mean much because the HDR still sucks on the GN850. In terms of input lag, as always, they're all very good and at the top of their class. But response times are nowhere near the same between these 3. Without a doubt, the Mobius is the best here, having the black frame insertion that not only looks good, but also increases the screen's brightness, which is kind of unusual because usually it's the other way around. The Gigabyte also has black frame insertion, but it's nowhere near as good. And the main issue is that it has this smeary looking mess that VA panels are typically known for. But what's weird is that if you enable the black equalizer, there's much less blur than what the overdrive settings can do, which is also extremely weird. This kind of segment has been weird so far. Anyway, when you combine both the black frame insertion and the black equalizer, you get pretty good results for a VA ultrawide that costs only $450. And then if you want to go back to those really high contrast ratios, turn the black equalizer off again and enjoy your cinematic content or game or whatever. Lastly is the LG, which has no black frame insertion, so really just standard pixel response times. Now let's get something out of the way real quick. Just because the LG doesn't have black frame insertion doesn't mean that it sucks compared to the other two. Because we're talking about ultrawides here, not competitive monitors. These aren't people's first choice for competitive shooters who require the absolute lowest pixel response times. But if it's something that does matter to you, you will want to avoid the LG. Back to the black equalizer though, the Mobius and the LG perform very well, though the LG is slightly better and the Gigabyte has the worst black equalizer I've ever seen. It's not just this monitor, but every Gigabyte monitor I've reviewed in the past, so it really doesn't seem like they're doing anything to try to fix this, especially since I've been critical on them in the past about this thing. Maybe they'll fix it in future monitors, who knows, but black equalizer still sucks on gigabytes. Now, if you're someone who likes to game and do some pro color work, the only monitor you want to consider on this list is the LG. There are a few reasons why you don't want the Mobius or the Gigabyte. First, gamut coverage on the Mobius and LG are better than the Gigabyte, with both having identical gamut coverage. The Gigabyte just doesn't compete here. But the big issue with the Mobius is that it cannot calibrate colors properly. This is an issue I've had with every Mobius monitor I've ever reviewed, where calibrated color accuracy looks just like the default color accuracy. This is a non-issue with the LG, where the monitor does fine out the box and has no issues calibrating. The Mobius does, however, have an sRGB preset, which is perfectly calibrated out the box for sRGB work, but being that this is a P3 focused display, not sRGB, that means that anyone who wants to do any kind of professional level photo or video editing won't see colors accurately, and their finished product might not, or probably won't, look like what they envisioned. If you're just doing YouTube videos like I am and don't do intense color work or don't even color grade your videos like I don't, then the Mobius is perfectly fine, and I think it's the best one on this list, especially since it has way more features than the LG and Gigabyte. We're talking picture-in-picture or picture-by-picture, which the LG does not have, but the Gigabyte does. an automatic brightness adjust sensor, which only the Mobius has, good black frame insertion, keyword there, good black frame insertion, color weakness for the colorblind, built-in speakers that are the best built-in speakers I've ever heard from any gaming monitor brand by far, and a few other things. If none of that matters to you, the LG will be the next best option, and if you just want a VA panel for the nice contrast ratios, that's what the Gigabyte is on this list for. It's probably the best 1440p 144Hz ultra-wide with a VA panel, since it has pretty much every major gaming feature, decent response times, all for a price that's barely above companies like Viotech and Scepter. And this is from a reputable company. Well, at least their monitor division is reputable. Can't say the same about their power supplies. Next, we have the 38-inch 1600p 144Hz ultrawides. This is the Mac Daddy of ultrawides. 38-inch ultrawides are the perfect sweet spot between size, width, and height. There's only two options that I can recommend right now, being that there really isn't that many competitors in the space, but there is another one coming, which we'll get to later. But the two options is, one, the Alienware AW3821DW and the LG 38GN950, which is my personal monitor. There's an MSI model coming out soon that I'll be reviewing, so subscribe if you don't want to miss it. But in terms of what I know between these two, is that the LG is basically my favorite simply because it doesn't have a physical G-Sync module. Now, I know what you're thinking. What are you, dumb? The G-Sync module is awesome. Well, it is, but there's a reason why I don't like it, and it's because of what I mentioned in the other monitor segments if you were watching that. The inclusion of NVIDIA's module basically means that it limits how well companies can make their features work and how much they can add in terms of feature set. So while the LG and Dell perform very similarly in terms of input lag and response times, the LG's black equalizer and color vibrance works much better, and it has support for software OSDs, which the Dell does not support, and it's all because of that G-Sync module. Where the Dell beats the LG is in design and price. Without a doubt, the Dell looks better, but if you're looking for the brightest RGB lighting, that'll be the LG by far. The Dell is also cheaper, but kind of, because Dell loves doing this thing where they have this stupid high MSRP but never sell it at that price. They always discount it. So the Dell is usually $100 to $200 cheaper than the LG. And if you want that physical G-Sync module, a better design, and a cheaper price, then hey, go for the Dell. If you care about better gaming features and being able to control your OSD through a mouse click, as well as 16 more refreshes per second because the LG has a max refresh rate of 160 Hz versus the Dell's 144 Hz, then the LG is better for you. In terms of their gaming performance, well, again, input lag is going to be identical between these kinds of monitors, especially since they're probably using the exact same panel. And in terms of colors, they both have very similar gamut coverages. Their out-of-the-box color performance is very similar, and their calibrated performance is very similar as well. So it really doesn't matter which one you get in terms of that kind of aspect. Just the stuff I mentioned earlier is the real differentiating factor between these two monitors. All right, now we're going to go back to the 16:9 monitors, and we're going to be going over the 1440p 144Hz segment. The monitors that I think are the best in this segment are the BenQ Mobius EX2710Q, the Dell S2721DGF, the LG 27GP850, and the MSI MAG274QRF-QD. MSI, if you need somebody to help you with coming up with better model numbers, I'm your guy. Like, what the f is that? Anyway, all monitors have very low input lag. They all felt identical to each other. As with every other segment, the difference between input lag, like milliseconds, might be like 2 or 3 milliseconds between one and another, but no one will be able to notice that difference at all if there is a difference at all. They all have a good black equalizer with great color vibrance features, although I think the best one on this list is the Mobius, since BenQ has been working on the black equalizer space much longer than most companies. The Mobius also has the best black frame insertion tech out of the bunch, not because it's clearer, because it's not, that goes to the MSI, but because the Mobius has the highest black frame insertion brightness of 250 nits, where the LG is 215 nits, and the MSI is 130 nits. Now that's dark. If you're buying one of these with the intention of doing some professional color work, the best one on this list is the MSI. It has the widest gamut of all monitors by a pretty good margin, having 100% coverage of the sRGB and Adobe RGB color space and 96% of the DCI-P3 color space. That's incredible. While all other monitors have about the same sRGB and P3 coverage as the MSI, but hover around the high 80s in the Adobe RGB color space. Pretty far off. For color accuracy, the best one out of the box was the Dell, with an average delta E of only 3.25, with the MSI having the highest delta E of 4.6. So while the Dell has the most accurate colors out of the box, they're all not as good as they should be for professional color work. You're going to need to calibrate all of these monitors if you want to have perfectly accurate colors for your pro apps, except for the Mobius. For some reason, Mobius monitors just don't calibrate properly. Like I mentioned in one of the other segments, again, if you've been watching, you'll know what I'm talking about. I have no clue why, but working on Mobius monitors with calibrations, they just don't work. The only thing you're gonna get is the sRGB preset, which is flawless. It has basically perfect color accuracy and gamma and grayscale and pretty much everything. But again, these are P3 focused displays, not sRGB focused displays. So if you're working on videos or photos, you're not going to be able to get the color space that you need because the sRGB preset clamps the color gamut to sRGB, not P3, not Adobe RGB. So if you want to work with Adobe RGB and DCI P3, the Mobius is the worst one here. Plus, you probably should go with the MSI anyways because of its higher gamut, if you're going to be doing a decent amount of professional color work. Now, in terms of what I think the best monitor for this segment is overall, I'm still going to give it to the Mobius despite its calibration issues. It just has so many features that you just can't count out. Color weakness for the colorblind, good built-in speakers, an automatic brightness adjust sensor, and a bunch more. But a downside of having an all-in-one monitor means that it costs much more than its competitors. So if you don't care about this stuff, which I know most people don't, I do, then I'd say get the MSI or the LG because I think they're tied in second place. At this point, I wouldn't even bother with the Dell because of these three other monitors in this list, but if you want a good monitor and the Dell is the cheapest by quite some margin, then there is no reason not to go with the Dell because it is still a very good monitor. It just doesn't have those gaming features to really compete. That's the only thing. No black equalizer that's good, no black frame insertion. Those don't matter, and you probably don't care. But that's this list. Sadly, I didn't review, again, any 1080p 144 hertz monitors this year. And I don't think I ever will, just because it's a very to me, that's just too low. I want 1440p 144 hertz or higher. 1080p has to be 240 hertz, or if it's going to be 144 hertz, it has to be 1440p or 4K. That's just how I feel. So I'm sorry for you guys, but there are other videos out there that'll be able to help you. But yeah. If you guys think this video was good, please leave a like. If you think it sucked, leave a dislike. You can't see it anyways. Haha. If you loved it, leave a sub. Consider supporting me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Every contribution helps because I'm trying to do this full time. And the more Patreons I have, the more I can quicker I can quit my job. So yeah. Anyways. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, then great. If you have any feedback, let me know down below what I should add next time, what I should have done different. And other than that, have a great day every day. Peace. Oh, happy Black Friday. Happy Thanksgiving. Good enough.